So, but before we start, for everyone on the podcast watching now, I want you to give like a 20-second version for everyone watching who hasn't come across your stuff yet. Who are you and what are you building right now?
So, short story, I'll try to keep it short really quickly. So, I left communist Russia in 1990. So, we escaped as refugees to come to America to better life. So, I wanted to say that we came here as immigrants for this idea of like pursue a better future. And it was really hard because when we came here, we lost everything and my family had to start from nothing. And so being an immigrant, like you kind of always have this survivorship of like, man, you have to make it in this country. And so like I've been through a lot of different careers. And so I actually got into code in my late 30s. So like don't let my baby face fool you. I'm 45, about to be 46. And so I started to learn to code at 35 and I didn't know that I could get a job to begin with. And so I started this YouTube channel. It was originally called Coding After 30 to kind of document my journey to see if I could get hired. It was really difficult. And so from 35, it took me almost like 4 years to get my first job. So I was like 39 when I got hired. I started working for it was like a health company. They built the people software for hospitals. So it's called VersaSuite, the worst company I ever worked at. VersaSuite, by the way, if people want to Google it, worst company ever. They suck a lot. Actually, they paid me $13 an hour, $13.75 to be clear. In the US, that's crazy. That's less than $20,000 a year, I think. But I needed a job. And so I took whatever I could to kind of start working there. And while working that job, I kept trying to learn as much as I can. I actually had to work a second job so I could pay rent, whatever. And then I worked there for a year and a half. Then I got a job working for a financial company, worked there for a while. And then finally, I worked at Strappy. There's the sign back there. Amazing headless CMS. I love it. And basically, that's been my story. And now, in terms of what I'm building, it's kind of crazy because with the AI and the tools that we have, I feel like we could dive into exploring things that we've never done. And so I'm more curious now about like building products that people may want to use. And so right now I'm working on a video editing software that runs locally on your computer with local AI, built with Rust and Tori. For the front end, it's using TanStack, which is kind of crazy because I don't know Rust, but I know how to code, right? And so with understanding coding to intermediate level, I guess, like jumping to something new with AI tools is kind of crazy. And so like I have this pretty much ready beta, which took me about 4 days to build. And it was kind of exciting and scary because at first it's like, oh my God, like developers are being replaced. And then I'm realizing that developers are not going to be replaced, but like you need to understand how to be effective and efficient with the tools that you have. Because the trend that I've seen in companies is that instead of hiring a lot of developers, they just have like a leaner team that's expected to be more productive with some of the use of AI. And we could talk about AI and my thoughts on it more later if you guys like, but I'm not fully sold on AI, but I think it's still amazing if you look at it as a tool that empowers you to build things. And the reason why I say this is because I just built this product that like I'm going to keep it open source, but I realized you could literally iterate through different products within days, put them in front of people to see if they have like a use case for them. And if they do, you could kind of dive into that project. But the fact that you could iterate so much faster, it gives newer developers this opportunity to build like really cool products for people and try to market them to your community, to your friends and family at first, and then doing like basic marketing to get it in front of people. And there's a potential that you could find a successful idea. I mean, it's not like easy, right? It's going to take a lot of effort, like building a business, building a product. But I think it's kind of cool. On one side, a lot of like developers are worried that AI is going to take their job. On the other side of the coin, new developers coming in who kind of know how to code could compete with those senior devs to a certain point, right? And that's cool to me.
It's actually crazy you mentioned that because we had a guest prior. We had this person who runs this startup and he was talking to me about SEO and GEO. So GEO, generative engine optimization, is basically how you can get stuff to be listed, how you can get ChatGPT to recommend stuff about a product or something. And he was basically telling me that right now with the age of AI, like the disparity in between skill levels is like just non-existent because like nobody really knows the rules of the game anymore, right? Like back when I was first starting, like I think a couple of years ago, programming languages, you had to like learn these rules, you had to learn how things worked. You have, and but like now I see tools, systems being built by people that just had a problem to solve. Like it's more or less about how do you get from place A to place B, more about, hey, this problem exists. And I feel like programming has turned less into, hey, how do I do this, and how do I write this program in a specific way in which it functions well, more into, hey, I can build programs, I can solve problems, but what problems do I solve? I feel like that's sort of like the new thing that developers have come kind of like pointing into.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, where you spend your time is shifting. And I think as a developer, I think, in my opinion, you either building tools for other developers, or you're solving like really, really hard problems, or you building products for people to use, like as an entrepreneur, right? And so, and what I realized, like a lot of the junior things that unfortunately that we used to do when we first get hired, like a lot of seniors could do it with AI. And right. And so there's no need to like have as many juniors, which is sad because it's not filling up the next or helping the next generation to get trained up to go the junior, then intermediate level, then senior level. But at the same time, it's and to kind of shift the bar, like to get that entry like job, you need to know more. Weirdly, but you also have to be very proficient with the AI system. Like to give you an idea, in our company, like we're really like pushed towards using AI, but not like in the token maxing way where they're just like, oh, spend as much tokens as you want. No, it has to be a quantifiable way where you're able to actually prove that you actually save time or were productive by X on your next review, right? It's not like, oh, just do whatever. It's like you actually have to prove, because one thing that I see with AI tools, and this is something that I kind of hit yesterday, I was working on something with AI, and then I realized it took me longer to do it with AI, and it wasn't like a coding task. It was like some other like research task that I could have done certain parts of it myself better. And so I used up a lot of tokens and I used up a lot of my time. And so this comes this balance of being effective and efficient with the tools where you're able to deliver the final result, but do it in a very effective, efficient way where you're not thinking that you have infinite costs with AI. And one thing that I was going to say with AI, like I love AI tools, I use them all the time, but it seems that all the companies are going this subscription token, not subscription model, but token based. And token based is a lot more expensive than your subscription. And so I actually had a situation where I coded something with Claude, and in 2 hours I spent $100. And if you think how crazy that sounds, let's say you're a developer, you make $50 an hour and you just spent $100 an hour to build your product. Did you make any money? No, like you had the tool build a thing for you, but you had to pay out of your pocket to pay for it. So like, and some people will say like, well, my company's like paying me to use Claude. Well, now you're like a more expensive developer because you got your salary and that you got AI like token like budget. And so now like I'm just making easy math. Let's say you got paid $1,000 and a month, nobody gets whatever. And then $1,000 like in tokens, that's like, $2,000. And so it's crazy. And so I think like if you look at Uber, I think they went back to kind of, make their AI budget a lot smaller because they realized that even though they were using all the tools, it wasn't really delivering new features and new products. And so the thing that I'm saying, like, I think there's so much stuff happening now around AI and people are wondering, how much of engineering do I need to know? How much of like code I need to know? I think like you still need to be the best engineer you can. You just also have to leverage these tools in a way where it's effective but cost efficient. And if you're brand new, to me, like that's exciting because now with help of AI, you could learn faster, build more projects, and at the same time develop the skill of being maybe agentic coding first, but still having the knowledge and the chops to be able to manually code if you had to.
Gotcha. Um, Something that I've actually noticed in my team recently, because we've been implementing AI, like we're a newer company, so like from day zero, we've had AI just building stuff. And something that I've noticed is that my developers who rarely would spend many tokens have now been completely like AI focused. Like, yes, they do know how things work, but I feel like there's comes a point where they're like, it's just more convenient, like convenience trumps all. Where I feel like we've had some bugs which I personally feel like it would have been solved if a person actually took like one look at it. And like I feel like that sort of issues are going to pop up more in like, especially in like junior developers. Also, like so like if you think about it, previously I feel like the difference is going to be like right now it's not like the limit of what a junior developer can do is not like it's changed. Like they can do a lot more. Like they can do whatever the model can do. But I feel like the difference is a junior developer isn't going to pay attention to like the minute to like the tiny details that like a senior level developer might break. Now, with that said, like, do you think like the pathway to a junior developer has changed? Like, since less junior developers are being hired overall, and we still do need senior developers. And I like from my experience, I don't see my junior developers figuring out more. And this might be a management issue from my side, but I don't see them like figuring out more about like what the underlying program works, because there's always, Claude, help me fix this.
Yeah, the first point, I just, because you touched on, you said about like AI is more convenient. It's not even convenient. I think it's that if a developer is using AI to build something and you don't, you already can't compete with them. You're just never going to compete and keep up with their output. It's just not going to happen. So that's why if you're a junior developer, you need to learn to build things with AI in a way that are production ready and like rock solid products. Okay, that's one. And number two, yes, the path to junior development, like, I feel has changed. And I think like it is much harder to get a job, but I don't think it's impossible. I think the hard part about this is now understanding where's your value in software, right? Building the software now is becoming like not as expensive, right? Because you could like use AI tools, and not as hard because again, you have these AI tools to help you out. What becomes more difficult is supporting the product you built with your customers and your clients. So as a junior developer now, okay, you could build a product, great, but what does it look like when it's deployed? What does it look like when you have a bunch of users using it? You kind of have to understand this part of it more now, where before, like I remember when I first started my first job, I never had to worry about deployment, right? I build a product, somebody else, like we had DevOps team, like somebody deploys it. But now if you're building a product, you have to understand the full life cycle of how the user is going to use it. So you almost have to be like a product manager, designer type of person. And at the same time, also understand the full deployment cycle of like what happens when the user hits your website and their interaction with your product, and how like that's deployed and handled. And like what happens if you have 10 users, 1,000 users, what happens if you get more users? You kind of have to start to think about it, because your value as a developer is now going to be maintaining and supporting the product, because building it, like in my mind, is a little bit easier. And also being able to understand like architecture better, and or being able to kind of have your like critical thinking and system thinking, like always working on that, because the idea is you might not know how something works, but you should be able to discuss it with AI and then take a bunch of different ideas and test them out, build 3 versions of your app, right? Using 3 different like patterns, and then be able to decide which one works best, which one is going to lead to more bugs or less bugs. What are the pros and cons of each? So I think as a junior is like thinking about how to build systems, number one, how to think clearly through all the different parts and how they fit together. And 3, being able to use AI tools to kind of think through what each part is doing and to understand, is this the best version of the thing that I'm building, being able to test it. And so like I'll give you an idea. Before Fable got like turned off for everybody because, oh my god, what is happening, I used it to help me build my video app that I was working on, and I was surprised that like it actually sucked. And then I realized it's not Fable that sucks, it's the fact that I didn't understand what I was trying to build, the product, and I didn't give it enough. Like I gave, by the way, pretty detailed spec files, like right, like planning, right? That's another skill you need to have, like this, design the whole product, every little piece of it. And by the way, if you don't know like how software works or how different system works, it's going to be very hard to kind of give and create those spec files. But I realized that even when your models get better, they still won't get the thing that you want unless you specifically know what you're looking for. So for junior developers, like if you're starting out, I think you should be excited, but because of like the tools, and I know it seems like it's challenging that sometimes like, oh, it's hard to get a job, but if you really want to be in this industry, just go for it. I think there's a lot of still opportunities there, but think about when you're building a product, you can't just build a CRUD application, right? Like it just, anything that AI could easily do with one prompt, like it's kind of like you shouldn't be building those type of apps. So you want to build something that is more complex. I'll give you an idea. So I built this YouTube knowledge base and a music knowledge base because I learning music and I want to kind of get better at playing certain instruments. And there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube. And so I was like, oh, there's a lot of music knowledge on YouTube. So let me create an app that will allow me to parse it and create like learning resources out of it. And so one of the few things I realized is that when you have different content, you have two ways to search. You could search where you're matching words, right? So if I say guitar, any content that has guitar will show up. But if I say like, playing, like very conversational, say playing guitar, classical music, whatever, that might not be an exact search in search. And so like you kind of had to figure out, well, how do search engines do this? And so I had to learn about different paths. There's one, I think it's like BM25 algorithm. That's a search algorithm that you could apply to get certain solutions. That's not something I knew before building that app, but through having issues with it and being like, man, I need a better search algorithm. You do research online and you find these something. So I found that. And then I realized, but that doesn't give me contextual search, right? If I search or not able to search like contextually. And so I'm like, oh, maybe I should look into like vector databases. How does vector search work? And then I'm like, oh, you could combine both of those strategies, BM25, and then your vector search and improve your application. So that's not something like AI would tell you to do, right? That's something you have to kind of know or search because you hit an issue and you're trying to find a solution, right? And so that's kind of like the thing for juniors is focus on building apps, and with each app you build, try to find a more complex problem to solve that even AI like is not straightforward path. So like you have to still use your brain to try to figure out like how to get to the solution.
Yeah. So something I wanted to ask you is that it's a bit tangent to what you said. Like since AI is making everything a much more easier for people to get started in building, how important do you think branding is right now for a developer? Because like historically, developers were not super public faced people. Like they were not creators on YouTube, or they were not super popular content creators or anything like that. But recently, ever since the AI boom, I see a lot of people coming into the built-in public space, building a company using AI, or like vibe coding and all that aspects. Like how important do you think as a developer
I'm a little
branding?
bit biased to this because like, I have a YouTube channel and it's really big part of me, like being able to put myself out there and build a job. I think in nowadays, like branding and marketing and like people like, I don't have a business to market. No, you're marketing yourself, right? You're a person, you're marketing yourself through your branding, through like letting people to know you. So the hardest part about getting a job is getting noticed, right? You could send out 1,000 resumes, and if that's all you're doing, you're never going to get hired. Resumes don't work, right? So the way you build awareness is through building your brand and then going to meetups, meeting people face to face, asking them, hey, is your company hiring? Like sharing what you're building with a bigger community so people know who you are. So I don't know if anybody know who John Smilga is, but he was like one of the biggest Udemy creators on Udemy. And I'll just tell you the story to understand that branding and positioning and marketing and why it's important. And I literally, before I got my very first job, like I took his courses in React, a bunch of his other stuff, and it actually helped me get a job. So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I just want to tell you, I just landed my first job. Thank you so much for your courses. Is there anything I could do? Blah, blah, blah. And then I was just, not him asking me, but I would just keep sharing how I use his courses on my YouTube channel and share the projects that I'm building. So not only am I sharing what I'm building, I'm also talking about somebody else, even though I don't have to. So you always lead with value first. And then one day he reached out to me. He's like, hey, Paul, I see you putting so much content around my content. And I was wondering if you wanted to do like a podcast with me. So I think they're still up on his channel. We did, I think Launch Code, I forgot what exactly the name of it, but like Power Hour tech talks basically. And then we started doing this podcast, and eventually he actually invited the developer advocate from Strappy. And while on that podcast, we were chatting, and I was like, and I was very obviously knowledgeable with Strappy, and I could touch on this a little bit in a second because it makes sense. But I literally said to the guest in the podcast, I'm like, listen, haha, like, because somebody in the comments said Paul knows more about Strappy than their developer advocate. And I thought it was kind of funny, but I publicly said it. But I did say, hey, since I have you here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to send you my resume and I'm going to ask you to show it to whoever needs to see it to get me hired. I said it jokingly, right? And then I get an email from Strappy, be like, oh, like Daniel passed your resume and we want to interview you, right? And so this is weird connection from something like us taking a course, reaching out to a creator, not expecting anything, lead it to a podcast. Then that podcast happened to get Devrel from Strappy and me like calling it out and actually being like, hey, I'm going to send my resume, being like not overly aggressive, but you want to try to shoot for the things that you want, and then eventually getting the interview, and then eventually getting hired. And that's a crazy story. And somebody says you got lucky, and I'll say, yeah, I got lucky because prior to that, I built like hundreds of mini apps with Strappy. I knew Strappy inside and out. I was in the Strappy community. I made YouTube content around Strappy. I branded myself as a Strappy expert. So when they got my resume and they searched Paul Bratslavsky online, they're like, Jesus Christ, this guy, all he does is talk about Strappy. He'll be like the perfect person to hire here. And so this branding and this idea, I think, is very important. And I know I'm talking a lot. The last final key point is that if there's a company you want to work for, or there's a like tech that's interested to you, I would start hang out in all those communities. B, I would start making mini content like on X, like how I build this, and tagging that like product or community or whatever it is, and then just position yourself as that expert in that topic, right? And then eventually you're going to get noticed. It's going to take a while. And there's this girl that used to work for Vercel, Delba. She now works at Anthropic. What crazy about her, she's amazing, by the way, but she started as a self-taught developer. She had a YouTube channel where she made a few videos around Next.js. She got noticed. She prepared herself. She went, got interviewed with Vercel, got hired at Vercel, which is crazy. Like I would have never been able to get hired as my first gig at Vercel, but she's very smart. Like she put in the work, and then she worked at Vercel, kept skilling up, kept making connections, and now she works at Anthropic. And so there's this idea is that there's people that make excuses that like, oh, it's too hard, I'm not gonna get it. Blah. It's like, yeah, you probably won't, but there are people who just don't think about excuses. They just think, okay, this is not working. What should I do next? Okay, how could I pivot? How could I update my strategy? Is it my resume? Is it my skill? Am I not talking to the right people? What is it about me not being able to hire? And then they systematically break it down, and then they get hired. And this is why I like you guys. Like you are like, technical, but you have this entrepreneurial mindset where it's like, if the opportunity doesn't exist, I'm going to make it. And you guys are living proof of that because you're doing your own things. And that's what a lot of people forget. They forget that you have agency to make decisions that will change your life and do the work that is required to get there. And I'll know for a fact that there's a lot of failures like on the way. Like I know for both of you, I'm sure you had your share of failures and the journey is hard. And then when people ask you, oh, how did you get there? Or you must be lucky. You're like, just shut up. You're like, no, it's just hard work and effort. And that's what people have to realize. It's like, it's still possible, but it's not easy. And I would argue that it's never been easy. All right.
Yeah. So Paul, something I want to talk about, like I'm not completely going off script right now. I see this mindset that you have about like building stuff, if the opportunity doesn't exist, you have to create it. And starting like getting your first tech job at 39, you had a life previous to that. I know you were like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor. You play music. You had a whole other career before that. So how did it lean towards, or like what lessons did you take from that career that helped you move on to this?
Yeah, so I did teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a long time, and I had my own martial arts school, and I ran like a brick and mortar business. And two important things I've learned. One is that talking to people and like human referrals is the best way to get new customers, to get a job, to do whatever. It's literally making connections with people and talking to them about yourself or what you could offer, and always provide value first. So that was the first lesson I learned. The second lesson I learned, so my business partner, this guy, Jim Hughes, he was insane, but he was interesting in a way where he proved to me, if you want something done, you just do it. You don't ask for permission. And so he used to do these stupid things with me where he's like, all right, Paul, we're going to see how comfortable you are being uncomfortable. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, all right, we're going to go to the supermarket. We're going to buy tons of groceries, and you have to try to ask them to give you all the groceries for free. And he's like, if you're not going to do it, I'm like, we're not going to work together, because it means you don't have what it takes to run a business, because you're not able to deal with uncomfortable situations. And I'm like an idiot, embarrassed for myself. I'm like, oh, can we have our groceries for free? And it's just so awkward. And she looks at me like I'm like stupid. But the point is, like, you need to, whatever is uncomfortable for you, You have to embrace it and then do the opposite. And that taught me like one thing is that you don't know if you're going to have an opportunity until you ask for it or pursue it. And so she didn't give us all the groceries for free, but she gave us the milk for free. And I was like, wow, like we got something for free. That's crazy. And then another thing, like here's the crazy thing: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very competitive, and this was like a long time ago. But back in the day, it was. I mean, it's popular now, but it was becoming more popular. But there was like established black belt instructors already all over like the country, but there's still more need for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was at the time a blue belt, which is like the second belt, right? And you would never think like, can a blue belt start a school? Like who would want to learn from a blue belt? They don't know that much more, right? And so I started a school as a blue belt thinking like, I'm never going to get clients. But the fact is that if you good at what you do, you create a environment for people that they feel comfortable in, you have a good systematic program, you practice. Maybe I wasn't best at jiu-jitsu, but can I be a better teacher of the things that I do know, right? And so weirdly, I ended up building a school where we got to 250 students, where I was still teaching as a blue belt, which was insane because there was everything that said you can't teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and have a successful school as a blue belt. Yeah, eventually I got my black belt. Like took me only like 13 years, whatever. But like the point is that unless you fully try and commit to this path, you're never gonna know. And whatever excuses you have, what I learned, they're just excuses that holding you back. So like the crazy part to me, like to prove this point, there's grifters on YouTube that's gonna tell you they're gonna teach you how to AI code by selling you AI code. And that's literally how they're making money. And that's like their grift, right? But the point is, it's like, you might look at that and be like, oh my God, like I'm gonna learn that skill and like I'm gonna be able to code and you're gonna pay them money. But the truth is you don't need to do any of those things. You just need to do it yourself and say, this is what I want to do and do it. And I think like excuses hold people back. So if you like, I feel like this is how I feel. I'm like, I'm either going to try it or I'm going to die. I know it sounds weird, but like the way I started a successful Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school is because all my life, my parents told me, you need to go to engineering school. You need to do this. You're never going to make money as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor. And that pissed me off. I was like, no, that's not true. I'll prove it to you. So I went to college. My mom's like, oh, I want you to graduate with an engineering degree. So I started engineering degree. And then I was like, oh, my mom doesn't think I could make money as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Let me burn my bridges. Okay. Drop out of school, get a girl pregnant, done. That college path is out. No, don't have to worry about it, right? Second, my God, like, now I have to take care of my daughter. Like, okay, work 2 jobs, great, fine. Okay, now I want to like make a path in now that my mom is not bothering me about school anymore. You guys stay in college, by the way. I'm just telling you my story. It worked out for me. Now I'm gonna spend all my free time. How do I start a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school? How do I do this? So I met the right people. I kept practicing. I kept doing all this stuff. And then I started a smaller school. I made no money. I lost money. And then eventually I got more clients and I started like a second satellite location. Then I'm like, oh my God, I'm almost making like just shy of 6 figures on a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. I was like, my God. And then eventually everybody's in my family, oh my God, we always knew you're going to do this. Oh my God, we knew that you're going to make money. I was like, no, you never believed in me. And that's why I wanted to prove you wrong. And so the thing is, it's like you have to believe in your path and you have to be almost like insane about it to a point where you just pursue the thing that you want without the fear of failure and the fact that, it might not work out because it might not. And then some people will say, well, I don't want to pursue something that's not guaranteed. And that's tough because it's a legitimate fear, but it's a fear that's going to hold you back from doing anything in life because nothing's guaranteed. Like the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to become successful, I don't know if it was going to be successful, right? Me transitioning into tech, I didn't know it was going to be successful, right? But you just do it because you have the passion for it and you really enjoy it. And that makes it a little bit easier. And then when you make it, you're like, oh, wow, this is like cool. And you do it. But you just have to put all your effort into it. And one of the biggest challenges, like this is like the last thing in terms of advice. When I went to Brazil, started teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and started school, I actually went to business classes. And this is what my business instructor said. He said, dude, why are you taking business classes? You already have a business. It may not be successful yet, but you're doing the right things. Just give more time to your business, right? Do one thing at a time. And so I dropped out of the business courses. I actually sent them an email like 3 years ago, being like, bro, your advice, even though like it's weird, it was the best advice for me because you literally told me put all your effort into one thing and do that until you either fail or succeed. When I decided to switch into tech, here's the crazy part. I like, not to toot my own horn, but I was very like good at Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I was really good at instructing, and my circle of friends were other Brazilian Jiu Jitsu instructors, competitors. I knew a lot of like big names like in the industry, and my whole life was Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I immersed myself in that lifestyle, and then when I told I was gonna switch to tech, people were like, "What are you doing? You're so crazy. You're giving up all of this like career you built." But I was injured. I had surgeries, and I was like, you know what? I have to switch. I literally like, I know it's going to sound weird, but I couldn't hang out with my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu friends anymore because I was like, they're not in the lifestyle that I want. I want to be a developer. I want to be an engineer. I want to be in tech. So I literally started building a new circle of friends, new circle of communities that I could get involved. So I took Jiu-Jitsu and I just completely moved it out of the way because I was like, you could only focus on one thing and you need to be focused and committed. And so I just committed to tech, and I've been doing that ever since. And so now I'm here. And so like the idea is most people quit right before they make any progress, or they don't really commit to it fully, right? And that's kind of where people get kind of the hiccup.
Now, Paul, like when you switched into tech and you told me your first job was kind of not the best, right? And then moving on, you were like still a software developer role. In Strappy, you were given a developer relations role, which is like not really development, and not like, it's more towards like marketing and development together, which is like
Yes.
pretty new role. So when you like entered into developer relations, like was it like different from like I mean, it's obviously different from like a software engineering role, but like what was sort of like.
It was, yeah, it was super different because it's a totally different role, and I actually wanted to continue to be a software engineer. But at the same time, I love Strappy so much, I was like, I'll take any position. And the fact that I've been making content on my Coding After 30 channel, I kind of like teaching, and so I was like, let me like try this because it's a combination of being very technical in software engineer, teaching, and marketing combined into one. And that was difficult at first because, and I still feel like most people don't even know what DevRel actually means. It's like different, everybody has a different meaning of what it is, but it's basically like educating, developers to have easy experience using your product, learning your product, and sharing it with everybody else. But when I first started it, I actually tried to find another role as an engineer because, like, even though like I'm very loud and I talk a lot, this is a developed skill, but I'm actually very introverted and I prefer to like sit in front of my computer and not talk to anybody, as really as it sounds. And so I wanted to find another engineering job. And then I was like, you know what, like, let me try to go and become good at this. And I just stuck with it. And now with AI and all the tools, I realized that, like, you need to find a job for yourself where you're the best at, where you're able to excel. And for me, this happens to be developer like relations. And so for me, like if I were, and I'll be honest about it, if I went to try to find a job as a developer, it would be a lot more competitive for me than trying to get a job as a developer advocate, because I found this niche for myself, that kind of works for me, that allows me to stay competitive in the hiring market, just because, like, I've done it for a while. I built a good experience. And this is one thing that I was going to say, like being a developer on your own, like, is great, but developing some of these branding, marketing skills, sharing your content with others, kind of almost like being a developer advocate type of thing, I think it's a good approach because it allows you to learn the most important things, how to like advocate for yourself, not just for the software that you're selling, and also like making yourself public, right? And I think it gives you a little bit more security in the sense that Like you're not just a person who codes, you're a person that becomes the face of that company that you work for. And so I decided to stick with it. And so for me, I felt like it was a more secure option to lean into this than it is to just be a software engineer. And if you want to be a software engineer, right, you have to figure out what is that like kind of it factor that will tell your company we have to keep this person here, right? You have to figure out like how do you provide like value, like and that's something that you have to kind of think about and figure out. But I think like pick a thing and then pick a subdomain or a niche with it. So I'll give you an example. I have a friend, you might know him, Yandex, from the community in Strappy. He's working as a software engineer, but he doesn't build everything. He's literally just building payment gateways. So he's a great engineer, but he also picked one piece of the industry, which just happens to be really important, right? Because you need to collect money from people. So he's literally just building payment gateways. I'm like, bro, you figured it out. That's like a cheat code. You became really good at the most important thing that every business needs, a payment gateway. And that's his niche. And to me, like I realize is that it's not just coding, but it's coding and some domain knowledge that you have that makes you expert in that slice. So now, like, if someone says to me, "Oh, like I'm a developer and I need to like implement payment gateway," and I'll be like, "Hey, like, what do you do?" He's like, "Oh, I build this, I build that, I build this, I build that." I'm like, okay." And then I go to Yandex. I'm like, "Yandex, I have a gateway payment problem. What do you do?" He's like, "I only do payment gateways." I'll be like, obviously you're the dude for me because you're the expert in that one thing that I need. I think as developers, it's like find a domain knowledge and find like a niche that you could be best at. You can't be good at everything. Just like I found a niche to be a developer advocate, not a software engineer, just because as a developer advocate, I feel like I have more of my strengths showing up. If you want to be straight up developer, figure out this one area where you want to excel that's hard. And then that's going to help you stand out.
Paul, with like all your experience teaching developers and being in a development role for so long, what do you think is like the best way to educate a developer audience? Because like we know there are a lot of different audiences and each audience reacts differently to content. But like in your experience, what's like the best way to get to
So
develop?
for developers, one thing I was going to say, if someone is like straight up marketing mindset, none of those things are going to work. You can't market or sell to developers. The way you interact with developers is you talk code. You answer their questions. If you make content, it's not like, "Oh, we released 20 features, they're freaking awesome and they cost money." No, you instead give them example like, "Here's how you solve like this problem in our code. This is like an example." You share that example and you basically help them build the things that they need to build for their clients, right? You don't try to sell them. The way you sell a developer is you help them achieve their goal, if it's either with the solutions that you give, your product, wherever it is. And if they're happy and satisfied with their product, they'll sell it for you. You don't need to try to sell it to them. As a developer advocate, in my mind, all you have to do is figure out how can you help developers have a good experience building things with X, right? And you make examples, you make resources. Like recently, I'll give you an example. Recently, we released Strappy MCP, and so I just recently wrote a blog post testing like and finding like gotchas, finding like where is it good, where we still need to improve. So it's not just like sugarcoating everything, but being honest about where we are and then showing with here's where we are in beta. This is what you could do right now, and then give really good examples of how to use it like in your like product and kind of put it out there. And right, and the point is not for me to have them buy anything. For me, it's just, do they have a good resource that if they needed to implement MCP with Strappy, they could do it and they're going to have a good experience, right? And then if they do have a good experience and they really enjoy what they build, they're going to like advocate for your product and your software. So basically, if you can't sell to developers, you could only like, figure out ways to make their job easier. And if you could do that, I think you will be able to have them kind of talk about like your product.
Yeah, I wanted to sneak in a little more question, one more question, because this is something that I'm actually actively working on, and you being a developer like puts it all into perspective. So, Paul, you're pretty much familiar with everything I do for business. So the thing is, every the constant question in my mind that I'm always, hitting at is, how can I better help developers? How can I get, help them make better content? How can I help them make better, get the message out there in a better way? So being a DevRel, what do you think is like the biggest issue or like a roadblock that you guys face when it comes to making content?
The hardest part is like, so it's a very like good question, but it's a layered question because you have top of the funnel that people have no idea what Strappy is, or they're new to development, and so the content that you make for them is good content because it introduces new people to Strappy and maybe educates them on certain topics around like tech, right? But they're not a developer that's working with a product like, let's say, like full time, not full time, but like deeply, right? So that top of the funnel content is good to attract people, and it's great start, but then you have to have a transition. How do you move them from beginner to intermediate to advanced, like Strappy power user? But that's a long path, right? And that's hard. But you already have developers that are experienced. They've senior engineers, intermediate engineers that looked at the Strappy code base themselves because it's open source, and they dove into the code and they know Strappy like very well. And so you can't have that top of the funnel like, hey, here's like a controller in Strappy. They're like, yeah, okay, great, I knew that, right? And so the point is with that subset, which happens to be the biggest subset of users that you talk to DevRel, is experienced engineers that are building production products for the clients. So they don't need like but they're also the smallest subset, right? That's why you still need that top of the funnel content. They're a smaller community, but they need you to know like hard questions. Like, I just tried to deploy my application to Amazon and it failed like this. Here's the error message. How can you help me? And the problem with that, it's very hard to make content for that, right? Because it's a very niche specific and more of like an advanced to intermediate topic, which not going to get as many eyeballs. But under the hood, like if you help those developers and they have a product that they have paying customers that rely on your software, they need that help. So on YouTube, it might not perform as well, but under the hood, people that search for that content, they're going to have the benefit. So I think the challenge is to find a good mix of content which touches the top of the funnel, new users, introduce them to the product, and creates this funnel that drives them to become more experienced, like power user of Strappy, but at the same time have the subset for like power users of Strappy. What does that content look like? And maybe it's not delivered on YouTube. Maybe it's delivered through answering questions on GitHub issues, right? That's something you don't see. It's not something vocal, but finding a mix of what that looks like. And what I would say is that when you find that mix, also being like, we don't have to do all of it, right? Because there's certain things where the person like in it who has a lot more of that domain knowledge, maybe they could handle more of X, of like the super technical stuff, and we help to market make like supportive content around it. I don't know if that answers your questions, but I think it's like figuring out what you can do based on the skills that you offer as a company versus the things that you can't do because you don't have the years of that domain knowledge of the technical thing that really specific to certain edge cases, like advanced features, advanced like question answering, where you're like, that's actually should be a job of developer advocate and not our company that's helping them grow and market.
Now, Paul, something that actually is actually kind of weird is now that okay, so recently the way that I've started discovering software, like previously when I now whenever I discover like a product or a framework that I want to use, it's usually I just Google it and I research stuff, right? Like that's how I found React, that's how I find like a lot of stuff. But recently I found this thing called Shorebird, and the way that I found it was because I was trying to get updates, like over the air updates working on my app, and ChatGPT and Claude just recommended it to me, right? So like I'm thinking like with AI and a lot of people, like even senior and junior developers now no longer like actively being super involved in like the production process doesn't like hey, this error happened, how do I fix it? Like those sort of issues are kind of like no longer the main key, because like ever since like DX, like developer experience was a thing, it's always been developers that's been choosing like what sort of architecture that something follows, and then it's always been like management figuring it out. It's the same way when it comes to like Claude, because like now that Claude is actually doing the implementation, Claude gets to decide what architecture things are moving in. We get to make the final call, but like, do you kind of get like what I'm coming to, where it's like it's
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the way people discover stuff completely shifted, but Claude, and that's the whole point of birth of GEO, right? It's like, how do we create content, or where do we need content where AI is going to scrape our stuff and recommend us stuff? Like, for instance, like when you first started using ChatGPT, 100%, no matter what you asked to build, it would always be like Next.js or React at least, and it's not going to recommend Vue for you. It's not going to. It's just Next.js, right? Now I think it's becoming a little more nuanced. But yeah, so the point is like, I think the AI has a bias towards certain tech stack, and it will always recommend that tech stack. And a lot of times it's good enough, right? Because it's coming from data where people build many projects using the tech stack, and it has it in a data training. Hey, this is what people are using, right? Like for instance, building stuff with Next.js will always be recommended to you, right? And so the question for us, like in like Strappy, is like, how do we get Strappy recommended by like AI? And what it comes down to, like, and just to go a little bit into the marketing, like a lot of times, like people started doing this programmatic SEO where they started writing content with AI to kind of be like, okay, we're going to push a lot more stuff out there, and you could do good content with AI if you do it properly. But the issue now is that Google has changed their algorithm that like anything that looks like it could be mass produced or repetitive falls in a certain thing, like they're gonna start to like flag you. At least they're doing it on YouTube, demonetize your channel. So like the ecosystem is changing, but at the same time, it's like you, and now no one's using Google, no one's using search, people using like AI. And so the challenge for folks is, how do you get noticed with AI, and what does that mean? And so I think to your point, Dev, if a company figures out how to get noticed through geo on those platforms and get their product recommended, the better chance they have. But one caveat I would give to that, it's like, whenever you ask any of those AI, I love Claude, for an architecture, do like a second exercise. Ask it, if I were to build this with different tech, what would it look like? So at least you have a comparison. And maybe it's going to be wrong, but you're going to have two different opinions. So if you are getting recommended things, and by the way, Claude does good recommendations, but if you are going to use it, like, you shouldn't go, oh, gave me this first thing, that's what I'm going to stick with. You should always do, especially since it's easy, you just prompt, ask it again. Do 2-3 different variations and paths so you could get a better picture of what would be the right thing, and then do it. And that would be like my only thing. But like, you're right, Dev, like most people are discovering stuff through like just chatting with Claude.
whole way that Claude is like now recommending stuff, and like, because in my company, that's basically how we find our toolkits. Like we found our new UI kit, like that, the new UI components that we use. It's actually something that I've never heard of, that my developer just found, and they've been using it. It's been really good so far. So as a small company, like in my point of view, that's how we find stuff now. Do you think, like, how do you think, as a dev tool company, like Strappy as a dev tool company, uh, how would what would you guys actually do to sort of like make that shift? Because no one's uh like, YouTube only matters if someone actually watches their videos and like a user is aware of the different implementation stuff, but
Yeah.
that's no longer top of the funnel. Like, do you
Yeah.
think
So I think like having a good strategy where you have like different buckets that you're trying to fill, top of the funnel, mid of the funnel, like different. So I still think YouTube is an amazing place because like, for instance, using shorts, like it's more of a like a wider like strategy which gives people awareness of kind of discovering something. And then like when you're making long form content, that's when people search for it, right? Like, it might not get recommended, but if people have like a very specific question and your video fits that, it will be served to them. So I still think YouTube is a good strategy of like, that's part of the thing in terms of like LLMs, I think it's like for Strapi, for instance, we are open source, so our code is public. So obviously LLMs get to scrape it, right? And so if you make it very type safe, this is why TanStack is blowing up, because it's very TypeScript oriented and LLMs could make sense of it, right? And so they're able to work with it much easier. So if you're a software company, try to make your product in a way that fits kind of like the language of LLMs, also giving all the resources, you're adding your all the geo recommended things to your website, your repo, so it's much more searchable. And like, so one of the things we're doing is we're trying to identify like social networks like Reddit, like as like certain, like, and I don't know, like we're still trying to figure out, but there's certain places like third party kind of places where get scraped by LLMs, or they get some sort of like signal from, right, for deciding if we should recommend your product. So identifying what those places are and spending more time, whatever it is, answering questions, communicating with the people on those platforms. Also, like one things we were thinking, it's like, what are people searching? Like, so like we I don't use this software personally, but you probably will be familiar. We have an agency that helps us that we've been with for a while. They have GEO tools basically will tell you how does a prompt rate and does it recommend your resources. So basically the secret is trying to figure out how to increase that recommendation, and does it mean like what kind of content to make. And that's like the $1 million question. It's like, do you make blog posts? Do you make technical blog posts? Do you make repo projects like, for instance, Strapi and React, and you have a repo which is very public that can get scraped? And I think people are still trying to figure out what that looks exactly. But I feel that AI is going to become the new Google, like asking Claude, and the more companies can do to be there, the better it is, right? And but that, I think, like a lot, I don't think anybody exactly figured out how it works. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like what that looks like. Yeah.
Absolutely. So something that we see with AI again is like this absolute flood of AI generated stuff, AI generated content, especially like even on LinkedIn, everyone just sounds the same. Even on, you know, I know people who have automated tweet bots, or like everything's just sounding the same a lot. So when that happens, like how do you think creators and companies, especially like tech companies and developer tool companies, can stand out? Like everyone has the same tools, everyone is making the same Claude, same thing that pushed through Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. So how do you think a company or a creator can stand out?
Yeah, it's discovering your voice, right? And it's like what makes you different. So this is one of the things that like so for YouTube, like if you create content and what they say is like, if I look at your video and I can't tell what company you are or how you're different to like 10 other videos that are topic of the same topic, we're just gonna nick you. Like it's terrible content, it's AI trash. And so like it's not the problem, it's not the AI. The problem is that everybody sounds the same and it doesn't send like good signals. And it's hard to stand out. If the average is across the board and there's no one stands out, it's hard to get noticed. So I think for companies, finding a voice that's opinionated, right? You have to have people that love you, but you also have to have some people that hate you. I think that's good. Two, it's understanding that there's so much AI slop out there that actually like, and the crazy part about AI slop, so we started programmatic SEO and I was skeptical about it, but there's a period that it worked really, really well. We were able to publish like 10 articles a week easily, something like, then we ramped up to 20, which is insane. But the fact that it was picked up on Google SEO and actually drove traffic and had meaningful conversions, which is crazy. I think that's slowing down because the way things are shifting and because so much content is being like generated with AI. So now it's like, is it actually bringing value to users? It's like going back to the basics, right? It's being like, are we making content for humans? And is it driving value, right? And so I noticed this also with like AI music. Like if you use Suno and you just prompt, like maybe you make 10 songs, you're like, oh my God, all these songs are amazing. They sound so much different. This is great. I've done like over 1,000 songs with Suno. I'm not even kidding. I'm their like #1 subscriber because I love music and experimenting. If you just prompt, the songs will all start to repeat and you start to identify patterns and they're all going to sound the same and not interesting anymore. And so, how do you stand out? Well, you have to figure out, even if you use AI to help you, or Suno to help you, or whatever it is like you're doing, it's how do you make it your own, where it's so different that people will notice you. And I think that's the hard part. And it's coming back to this idea of being genuine, and doing stuff that's relatable to humans and figuring out what that means. And I think um, that is one step of getting there. And what I've noticed, so I'll give you an idea. I started a new channel where I'm trying to document my music journey, and I just released a video sucking at guitar. Right, I just suck at guitar, and I played it. And for my channel, it's got pretty decent views as a short. And I was like, why did this resonate? And because it was an honest journey of someone trying to do X, like learn guitar, do this, use this product. It's not like the typical pattern that people are used to. So and it's just going to be the hardest part, and whoever figures out will do well. But it's this idea of how do you make content that stands out through the AI slop, where people are going to be interested in viewing. And that's a very hard to do. And I think a lot of companies, some of them are leaning into TikTok, where they have very funny short that kind of is the hook. And then, you see something crazy happen, and all of a sudden it's like, we sell windows. And you're like, oh, okay, great. This is amazing. We fix cars. So it's but it got your attention. So I think it's this combination of experimenting and trying different things that make sense. But that only works if you know your core audience that actually want to buy your product. Because one trap with some of that content is it might go viral, but it might not convert and sell the product, right? And so it's finding that balance. But I think this is something that every company is going to struggle. And I think if you're a business, or you're trying to kind of have a product, is you need to become a student of attention grabbing and figure out what that means, and become expert at that. And that's why I kind of feel I know you guys are doing, even you, Dev, you start as engineer, but now you're running more of your company. And you really when I talked to you a few times, it's marketing and getting attention is becoming the most in demand skill. Because if you can't do it, you're not going to sell anything. You're not going to, and if you're an engineer trying to get a job, you're not going to get hired if you can't sell yourself, right?
Absolutely. The thing is, I always saw with all the AI tools coming out, I always thought at the end of the day, it's going to be us humans who will end up making the art. But more tools that come out every day, it's yeah, now we got an AI that can make music. Now we got an AI that can, draw. Now we got an AI that can edit videos and make videos, generate images. It's crazy to think about it. But you're right. We have reached a point where we have hyper optimized everything. And now we're going back into, we want mistakes. We want genuine human error in the video so that we know it's, oh, okay, this is human. Oh, he fucked
The
up in the
one,
video. That's great.
the one caveat I'll give, because I never thought I would actually come to a moment where I'm going to look at something that's 100% AI generated and be like, wow, this was a very well done, interesting concept and story. There's this YouTube channel, I forgot what it is. They made a bunch of 20-minute AI video short films based on the story of Peter Pan, but they made it dark and very crazy. And you watch it and you're I know it's AI generated, but it's not AI slop, because you could tell that a lot of care and effort went into building this. Same thing, there are certain songs that I know are AI generated, but I'm, oh my God, why is it so good? And why am I jamming to it? This is phenomenal. Or there's an app that I'm maybe somebody vibe coded, but it solves my specific need that I want to use it. So there's this, yes, what I just said, 100% applies. But the second part of it, at the end of the day, the customer will decide what they want to interact with. And so I would say, don't underrate AI as being your competitor. And this is where I think moving forward, it's people that really define and understand their customers and also understand the AI tools, and then they combine them together to build the best experience for the client. And so I think it's have a combination of the two things. And this is kind of and I think that's something that people are still going to be trying to figure out. But I feel there's going to be subset of creators that use AI 100%, but they're also making really good stuff. You know what I mean? And it's how do you compete with that?
So I saw this.
outside of being authentic, you know?
Yeah, so I saw this Y Combinator letter to all the companies that they have. It was like, we're no longer investing in companies that make AI products, but we rather want companies that use AI and solve that. So, for example, we were not going to invest in a company that solves problems for lawyers, but rather we're going to have a company which uses AI and starts their own law firm and defeats the competitor that does not use a AI. That's the new type of companies that we want to see. And I thought that was really interesting because it's like this point where we're like, AI is no longer going to be the competitor. It's the guy who knows AI better than you do and who knows how to differentiate and really make, like Paul said, like really good stuff. Like, it's AI, but then you're like, God damn, it's really good. I have to give it like hats off, dude.
But you also have to understand like your domain knowledge. Like if I start a company AI for lawyers, I'm gonna fail because I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand that business well enough. Like, so you need to have those two pieces. One thing that I was gonna say, like, um, yeah, that's like 100%. But the problem I have with that is twofolds, but I still participate, right? So don't get me wrong. Like I still use AI tools a lot, but you have to understand two things. One, if you use AI and you're building things that you don't know how to build, that's a problem, right? Because it's like, let's say you were hungry and I just kept giving you fish every day, right? It comes back to that adage, give a man a fish or teach him how to fish, whatever the hell that says. But I just give you fish all the time, you get used to it. And then I'm like, oh, now I'm not giving you free fish. Now the fish is $5. You're like, oh shit, but I still want to eat because I don't know how to fish. So I'll just keep you paying you $5. I keep giving you fish, and now I'm like, yo, this fish is $100. It's just $100. And you're like, I really want fish, but I barely have $100. But I'll give it to you. You give me $100. Then I come back. I'm like, listen, I'm not even going to charge you for fish. I'm going to charge you for parts of fish. And now this whole fish costs $1,000. And you're like, what the? I can't afford the fish anymore. And I don't know how to fish. So you're done. Like you can't compete. And so this is what's happening with AI. It's getting more like AI has been subsidized like crazy. And if now you look at the trend, a lot of the AI companies are going to token-based pricing. And here's the crazy part, coming back to that example, like you're literally paying money to give you fish. And you're getting used to getting that fish, but you don't know how to make it yourself, right? And if you don't know how to make it, and the cost gets so ridiculous, like Uber literally cut their budget for their developers that they don't have unlimited tokens for AI because they realize that the companies that win are the AI companies. And don't get me wrong, they're good tools. They're very helpful. But it will be a question soon in near future where more companies going to be like, does spending this AI budget make our company profitable? So here's the thing. You could use AI, but does that make you release more features? Does it make you get more clients? Is the company becoming more profitable? And if the answer is no, the leaders in the company will eventually be like, holy shit, we're losing money. This is too expensive, right? Instead of paying a developer, we're now paying developer and a tool. And if they use the tool without any sort of control or efficiently or whatever, it's going to become too expensive. And so the twofolds, like you could literally bankrupt your service with AI if you don't make profit or you can't justify the return on investment. I proved this to myself. And two, you're also not learning, or you should be like learning at least, but you're not learning the things to be able to do without AI. And so this is why I think as an engineer, you need to constantly try to, like, maybe you're not going to be able to build from scratch, but become a super learner and be able to easily jump into code and start to kind of understand what it does. So you still are very technical. So like AI cannot be a replacement. It's a tool. And if you can't code without AI, I would say you're in trouble. And then be ready that there's going to be a time where you might not be able to afford the newest, coolest models, right? Like I'll give you an example. I was building a project. I just wanted to try with token-based pricing. So it wasn't a subscription. It's paying per the requests you make. I built this page builder. I spent $200 in a day. That's crazy, right? That's over 100K a year money. So like, and the caveat I would give, like, yes, we have these amazing tools, but you have to understand, like, is it sustainable for companies to give infinite budget to their developers, or is that going to be limited? What does that mean? Like, you know what I mean? And so uh, I'm not saying like this is kind of like exactly what's going to happen, but I already start to see companies that taking cost into consideration and limiting people's AI bases because they can't justify the return on investment.
Hey, Paul, but like something that I do see is that whenever these examples of like, hey, AI can't be used to cost like justify the cost of investment, what I like a different way I'd like to think of it is that as developers, we're usually kept here to build a product or like get an end goal done. Like usually, like for me, it's like we have this thing that we need to launch in this specific day. Can we move it further? As much like there's always like a business end goal. The code itself isn't the thing that's generating money. It's always like something else that the code helps, and there's always like a third party paying to use the software, right? The way I like to justify ROI for AI is if someone if you're using a if you're using AI to build something that is we're not just like randomly testing stuff, and if I can like spend $200 or like let's say $1,000 to build something that would otherwise take like 6 months, that like provided whatever my developer salary is and X amount of developers, if I could do it with less number of developers and less time, I mean that maths is still profitable. Like even if it's like because like no matter what, like an AI like even if it's just speed, even if you're just paying a premium for speed, let's say it's more expensive than a developer. Even if, in like a company point of view, even if it's like more expensive but it's faster, like wouldn't that still be like a worth it transaction?
Yeah, but I would argue that that requires you to know that you're going to be profitable and being able to guarantee that you're going to have clients, right? There's a risk you're taking. So let's say you're building a new product and you're using AI to build it, and after you build it, you have no customers, and you just spend $10,000. Like that's going to be painful, right? And so I think like what happens is that you have a vision, you like directing the company, kind of like what your clients are asking. It's like the same thing. Like I'll use a very weird example because I used to do Facebook ads. You'll make a shitty ad and you put it through and you test it, and then you get like, oh my god, it's getting terrible clicks and it's not converting, it's not selling a product, and I just wasted $100. And you always would put like $100 budget to test an app, like to test an ad. And then eventually you're like, okay, we put $100 budget. For every $100 we spend, we get back 120. So you make it 25 bucks per 100. Then you put $10,000 onto that ad because you know it converts and you know that you're going to be in profit. It's the same thing with AI, is that you have to identify things that are going to justify the cost of AI. And if the cost of AI, like for every $100 spent on AI, the new feature shipped or the new product added returns like a revenue of like 200, whatever it is, then it is justifiable. And I think this is where the key is. You as a company leader have to decide or figure out pieces where it makes sense to dump money into AI rather than like some companies used to say just token max. It doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, if it does bring return on investment, then you just do more of it, right? Exactly.
Yeah, but the point in which like it costs money and we don't know if the product is gonna be profitable. That same is true for developers. Like if I'm gonna hire someone, if I'm not doing it myself,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's valid. Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
in fact, I'd argue it's like more expensive if I go and hire someone else than I.
But yeah, right. But I would say that is on top of like the company leader who has like, so you as an entrepreneur, you're taking all the risk. That's why, like, by the way, this is a very interesting thing you bring up. This is why a lot of people just want a job, which nothing wrong with that, is because when you get a job, you don't take the risk of the company being successful. You just show up. But the company, somebody in the company is taking responsibility. When you're an entrepreneur, and I had my own business, like you're taking a risk because you don't know if you're going to generate enough money to pay your employees, right? If it doesn't work out. And so I think like if you think as an entrepreneur, like you're taking calculating risks. And this is why like not managers, but CEOs, they get very bullish on AI because that's how they're looking at it. They're not looking at it as a like, oh, this is just my job. They're looking at it. What is the risk of like having engineers, having AI, having a combination of both? And am I willing to take this risk to build this product, right? And of course, you test the market. And so, like, I think like those are the people that make certain decisions, where like sometimes people are like, why did they lay off so many people? And it's because they did the calculation, the math, and they realized they could be more efficient and more productive with it. And it's just the reality of doing business. I remember when I had my own school, like when COVID hit, we had to downsize. And so we went from like a huge space, and we had to rent a smaller space because we couldn't justify the cost of the huge big space to support our clients. And then I had to like do other like ways to cut costs, like, right, that's a reality of like having a business. And I think sometimes people have to make the hard decision. But I think like you're right, that becomes like kind of like, what is the risk you're willing to take? And that need could be met by going and using more AI with fewer developers. You know what I mean? And identifying. But I think like, so like I think this brings up an interesting question. Like, what does it mean to like developers or anybody looking to find a job? And I think in my mind, it's like I don't think like jobs are going to disappear. I think like they're going to pivot. And I also think there's not going to be this thing where you work for one company for 2, 3, 4 years. It's going to be like you like you have to be able to kind of pivot and switch and work, for smaller companies. Maybe you'll be there a year, maybe you'll be there 2 years, but nothing like where it's like, oh, 5, 6 years, 7 years. I think it's going to become like not a norm. I think what companies are going to do based on their need, they're going to either hire people, and then when that need is no longer there, they're going to fire people, which is kind of crazy. But I feel like that's a reality that we're going to be living in.
I've actually heard the opposite take, where it's like they're just going to have like two people who are like very good with their code base. They know their entire code base end to end and can make AI changes and are very familiar with their specific technology, and like they're not going to be hiring juniors. So these guys are going to be working there for 5, 6 years. They're going to have like apprentices who are going to be like the
Yeah.
next gen.
Yeah, when I was giving my example, I saw like huge companies, so I think like they have like thousands and thousands of people. I think to your point is they're, and this is what I said, like they're going to be, when I said like they're not going to be this big company where they hire people and you're going to have long term like whatever. I think it's going to be like you described, smaller companies with like a business person, a technical lead, and maybe like another senior engineer, and then optimizing AI. And if you're good at that domain, like, yeah, that's where you're going to be. But it's going to be smaller companies rather than a bunch of big ones, and they're going to be very lean. But so like I like your example because this gives me a framework to think about, okay, hey, this is what people are doing? They're building small companies with one technical person, one business person. Why don't I lean into identifying what those skills are and learn those skills? So I could be that person that could be like in need for that company, where I could, do majority of the work as a solo developer, maybe with one apprentice and using AI, right? Because that's like a natural shift. Yeah. And then another thing that I've noticed, which is kind of crazy with software engineering, is that a lot of these companies, like you described, they also started in building more internal tools. Instead of like having to like pay a huge subscription to a certain tool, they could just build an internal tool themselves, and now they have all the access to it. They could make it however they fit for the use case. And so it's kind of interesting. I think like the whole industry is shifting so much, because even I just recently like created a post on Reddit, said, how do I justify paying $200 for Claude? And my answer is, I'm rebuilding all my subscription apps myself. And so now, like, instead of paying $30 a month, like, I don't need to. I just have my own version of that app that I use, which also like brought me to an interesting challenge. So like a lot of people like be like, well, if that's the case, why would anybody buy software if AI could build it? And then I realized the value of software is not in the product you build, but it's the support that you provide for that product and the customers. So the customers know that the product is going to work. Like, for instance, the $30 subscription I replace, guess what? I have to maintain my app. I have to update it. I have to make sure that it works. If something breaks, I have to fix it, even though with AI, but now it's responsibility on mine. And I'm realizing that what companies are going to start paying is shifting that responsibility off themselves and onto you, right? The product you provide, because they're literally paying for not having to mess with that product, like meaning like fix it, debug it, support it. They're basically buying back their time. So like, yeah, I could build 30 subscription apps that I use myself, but now I'm like maintaining them 10 hours a week. Did I really save money, right? If And so like I think this is like the interesting thing. Like I think there's still going to be need for software if it solves a good problem and it helps people to buy back their time, and people basically what they're paying for is not having headaches, right? And convenience of knowing that it's just going to work.
In fact, we've actually moved to a system in my business because you're saying that we're doing a new launch for a product. I won't disclose more details in here because it's still under construction. But essentially, uh, we are the way that we sell to people is that we're instead of just selling the software, we're also having a specific member that's in charge of that particular account, and it's so that the person doesn't have to interact with the software at all if necessary. It's just that he texts the person,
Yeah.
and then this person, it's like AI agents, and this person sort of handles the request. So this person does not have to learn about the software. It's just that their problems are are sent to this email and it's solved.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, you're paying for some sort of pain point that you have to fix. So, like, I pay money for this financial management app where it just automatically looks at all my accounts and says, like, hey, you're over budget here. You spend this much more because I can't do it personally, and I don't have the time to do it. So I'm like, you know what? I'll pay a company because it's a problem I have. It's helped me solve. And I think like as like software engineers, the challenge that we had before, it's like, oh, we wanted to get a job because I want to make money, which is, yeah, it's true, it's great, and you just get a job. But like now, like businesses, like they're thinking more of like, how do we make products that people need, and how do we make it with the most efficient team as possible? And so maybe we don't need as many engineers. And so there's this kind of like pain point where it's like, I want to get a job but no one's hiring because a lot of those companies are like, oh, we just want to be efficient and we will just build products. And this is where I see the shift. Like for engineers, it's either you become like there's two things you should do at the same time. One, you should try to become the best like engineer that you can in a specific domain. Like I used Yandex with his payment processing, and you should learn how to build products yourself. So that way you could have this path. I'm either going to get a job or I'm going to build a successful project and product and get my own clients. And one or the other is going to work out, right? But at the same time, like if you don't think about product first, you're going to undervalue, like overvalue what it means to be a software engineer. Like for you as a software engineer, you're like, oh, I show up and I code something. But that's not how a business person sees it. A business person sees it, we have a product that our customers wants. Here's the features we know that they want. So they hire an engineer to build it, right? And if that feature or is not successful and nobody's buying your product, the company is going to go under, everybody's going to get fired. And so like they have to make decisions from the standpoint like what is going to help our company grow and support our users and what that looks like. And if you're just an engineer that just try to get a job, it's hard to do it if you're not solving like difficult hard problems. This is why it's kind of sucks now that there's no path for a junior developer to get a job. And the way you counter that is you try to become intermediate senior developer on your own by building products that you could potentially release to the wild as your own. And you kind of have this approach. You kind of hedge against yourself. It's like, am I going to get a job or am I going to build this product? Maybe you get a job. Great, you got a job. Or hey, this product took over. Now I got this. And so like that's kind of like the way I'm trying to change the focus of my channel is just try different product ideas and then try to market them and see what happens. Just to kind of hedge against me getting laid off at some point.
So, what have you actually thought about starting an entrepreneur, venture on tech maybe? Like, I know you have experience being an entrepreneur beforehand, but you have like a lot of experience in tech now. Have you actually thought about putting A and B together and actually starting your?
Dude, I have ADHD, so I think about 1,000 ideas literally before you even finish that sentence. I had like 10 business ideas, and I'm realizing that's like my downfall is that I try to find too many things. But I did find something that I feel like is different enough that also is a new passion of mine, music. And so I'm trying to figure out, and it's like different than what I'm doing now. But what I want to do is create some sort of like combination between music and tech and build a product that allows new musicians to collaborate with other musicians like very easily. And I don't know if it's going to succeed or not, but this idea that, yeah, everybody's making music with Suno and AI, whatever, but I want to make an app where you could just share like a 30-second clip of you playing guitar, let's say, and then somebody else could see it, and they're like, oh, I'm going to play the trumpet, and then it stitches two videos together, and you could pick one, like just listen to Paul, just listen to the trumpet, and then somebody be like, oh, I want to add drums to it. They add the drums, and it's all like separate tracks, so you could easily move people out. So like someone, like now the video will have like a drum track, the guitar track, the trumpet track, and somebody like, you know what? I don't want Paul's guitar here, although he did a pretty good job. They could move me out of the video, and they could record their own guitar, and then there's going to be like a history of like what was the origin of the video. So the idea is like in this AI race where like everybody wants to make stuff with AI, I want to encourage more people to easily collaborate with other like shitty musicians just to vibe together, make connections, and maybe that app is not going to do well. And then make it like this idea of like actually encouraging people to learn like a physical instrument, you know, and maybe it's not going to be successful, but I just like this idea of trying to combine like a passion, different tech, also like this entrepreneurial like it niche of me to try something so crazy, and see if I could make it work. But that's kind of like what I've been thinking, which is so like out of left field because it has nothing to do with like what I'm doing like now, but it's still tech related and product related. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you're known for left fields. Like you went from
Yeah.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to tech to, I see you doing music, and I think that's pretty cool. And I think I've taken a lot of time of yours. I think I think the live has been going on for 1.5 hours, and I want to wrap it up. But before we
Yeah.
do, I want to end it on like one last question for you. So if everything that you've done disappear tomorrow, like all your videos, all the content that you've made, all the talks that you've given, or everything disappeared, and you have the next 30 seconds to leave one message for everyone, developers, creators, people trying to build something, what would you say?
Dude, that's a 30-second answer. If you lose everything, what is the one important thing left? Obviously, it's like you have your family, right? And your health is the most important thing. But what I look at it is that it's hard, but I try to have a mindset that everything that I have is borrowed and you can't take anything for granted. Like this job I have, it's borrowed. The YouTube channel I made, even though I put a lot of labor and work into it, is borrowed. And at any given time, it could disappear and I could be left with nothing. And so the only thing, like I literally tell myself, as long as I'm able to complain, meaning I'm alive, I could always have the opportunity to try to build it back up. And I know it sounds depressing because you're like, you just lost everything. But as long as you're able to move, like, do things with your hands, speak, you will always have opportunity to build yourself up. And like, I'm not like super successful, but I feel like I had some success in my life. And I went from like dropping out of school. I didn't talk about this piece, but I work as a mason building like brick stuff and I loved it. Then I switched to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I built a business. Then I kind of left it, became a developer, and now I'm trying to do music. And so like there's going to be so many opportunities to rediscover yourself. And if you're young, like have that long-term thing. Like if you lose everything, you're still going to be able to, as long as you're healthy, to build them back up. And that should be encouraging and empowering and not depressing. And so that's what I would say. Like, no matter what happens, you have the ability to get back up and try again. I think there's like a song, that says that, but whatever.
So that's it. So thank you, Paul, for like joining us today. That's an insane message. I think you have like talked a lot about mentality and perspective and getting things done. And I love it because like being an entrepreneur, I know like shit gets hard, and it's like getting through that is going to get you like to the reward at the end of the day. And thank you for like coming on the podcast. It's been fun having you.
Thanks for having me. And for anybody watching, thank you for dealing with my ranting. I'm really good at it. So I don't know if it's positive or negative, but at least like, thank you. Yeah. For giving us your time.